That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh, God, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.
What is going on, the OneCast fans? Welcome to Fishing Friday. Also, what is going to be episode 51. So we had some scheduling things come up. We had a guest lined up, and they had to pull out. So we were trying to figure out what to do for this week, and y'all gave some great suggestions on the Facebook post. So we're going to talk about some stuff live, and we're going to use this for episode 51. So if you're listening in like you normally do on one of our audio platforms, you may hear us answer some questions and stuff. If you're watching, you may hear us answer some questions. That's for our live viewers. So we try to go live every Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern on all over the place. Facebook, YouTube, trying to figure out Instagram since that's an option now. So appreciate everybody being here. Make sure you head over to OneCastFishing.com. Use the code the OneCast to check out. Save some money, get some snagless jigs, long neck hooks, and soft plastics, the Neds. You're probably out of time unless you're listening live to get them before Christmas. If you are listening live, Ben can probably tell you for sure, but there's a good chance if you order this weekend, they'll get out Monday morning, and you may get them before Christmas. So if you need those last minute gifts, remember OneCastFishing.com. Use the code the OneCast. Carolina Waters also. Make sure you head to CarolinaWatersNC.com. Also use the code the OneCast. They got some great gear over there. They're restocking, refitting, getting ready for the upcoming season. So keep your eyes there for some new gear as well. Boys, what's happening?
Ben, over to you.
Yeah, so for the folks obviously watching live or watching the video version later, I'm obviously sitting in the office right now. It's production season. We got less than a month to show season starts. I think that first Martin Luther King weekend in January starts the Raleigh Expo. So obviously I've been going every day, long days, getting product made up for the show. So that's why I am still here and not with you guys in the booth tonight, but definitely able to hop on it and talk about some winter fishing here in a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I did some winter fishing today, and it was absolutely brutal. So there's some good lessons learned, but hopefully you get all stocked up. The show season runs really well, and we have some really cool experiences in 2024. And this last year has been a heck of a journey for the show and for the tackle company. And it wouldn't be possible without everybody either tuning in, listening to the show, purchasing products and stuff. And one thing I want to mention is I'm not wearing one right now, but Ben has one on. So if you go to OneCastFishing.com, there's our apparel for the show is located on the website. You just go up to the top right corner. It says the OneCast. Click on that button. Check out the snapbacks and the shirts that we have. They're almost gone, so get them now so you can jam them down in the stockings and tell everyone Santa Claus sent them. And I appreciate the help and showing some support to the show. So I'm ready to dive into it though, man.
Yeah, so we are up on Instagram on the OneCast page as well. It looks like those don't come through the comments there, so I have it pulled up on my phone. So if anybody's watching over there, welcome. Appreciate you jumping on to Instagram. I don't know how it's going to work. It's our first one doing it over there.
Mm-hmm.
That's exciting, but also exciting. The youngest ever qualify for the Bassmaster Classic. What, 17 years old, right?
17 years old, yep.
Qualified through the Bassmaster Team Championship down there in Florida on the Harris Chain a couple weeks ago. What was do you remember his name?
Last name is Jaworski.
Aaron, I think.
Aaron Jaworski.
Aaron
Yeah.
Jaworski.
So him and his dad won that and then had to have a one-day fish off. So the old man and the son had to face off against each other for a one-day. Winner of that wins the berth to the Classic. and the young gun took out the old man. So
wait a minute.
Punched his ticket.
What do you think that conversation was like at nighttime? It was like, Dad, let me win so I can go to the class.
I thought about that. I know we talked about it the other day, and I was like, I don't know if that dad tried, but like now that I think about it, like if it was down to me and my old man, like knowing the years he doesn't have left, I'm probably going to back the pedal off a little bit. But that's me. Like some people are more competitive. They may not think that way. I'm still going to go out there and try, but
yeah,
I think they probably both fished hard, and whoever made it, like
either way, it's a proud moment for that
heck
family.
Yeah. I mean, you get to punch your ticket whether you're the dad or the son there, and go fish it. It's pretty awesome. So
it's a cool way to get to the classic. I think we've talked about it before, but like obviously you can get through the classic through the elites. You can get through the classic fishing an entire division, which is 3 tournaments, Bassmaster Open Series. And if you win one of those and you fish the other 2, you punch a ticket to the classic. And then the team championship, which is really neat format. And like Pete said, you have a fish off
Steve,
at the end of it. And the winner of that fish off goes to the classic.
Yep.
So it's a pretty cool deal.
Yeah, there's still ways for the everyday angler to get there. So did you say Nation too?
Bass Nation, I didn't say
Bass
it, but yeah,
Nation,
Bass Nation. Yep.
I think that's 3 spots. Don't they give the Bass Nation? Is it 2? Oh no, that's the invite to the elites now. So
yeah,
just winner.
College guys.
College, college is a path
and
there.
Do the high school?
No,
the 2 high school winners, do they get to compete?
No, they do not. No, it's just college. I'm curious because I thought there was like an 18 age limit for the elites and classics and stuff because of insurance reasons and stuff, which that can't be the case if they're going to let him go, or maybe he turns 18 before the classic. that just popped in my head. I remember reading somewhere, there was an age limit there, because I know, like at 17, I think it's 17, like BFLs and stuff, you have to have somebody run the boat for you, kind of like in high school. Like you have to have a boat captain. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any. Oh, there we go, Pat. I'm going to butcher your name, Pat. He said he turns 18 in January, February. So that is null point. I appreciate you answering that, bud.
It's like, hey, you can
on Instagram.
You can join the army at 17, but you can't fish in the
classic. Other news. MLF changed BPT again. We're not going to waste a bunch of time on that because it'll probably be different again next week. The only thing,
80, 65, and 50. That's the way that
consistent is inconsistency.
Boom, boom, boom. Right. Yep. But
we want to talk about some winter fishing. So we put up there, if you're not part of our community on Facebook, make sure you jump over there. It's the OneCast community. If you search that, I think if you just type in the OneCast, it'll pull it up. Request to join over there. We put a thing out there saying, what do you all want us to talk about on Fishing Friday? And there were a bunch of different questions, lots of good stuff, but there was quite a few around winter fishing and baits and things like that. So we decided to talk a little bit about winter fishing. Again, for those of you listening live, appreciate you being here. If you didn't have a chance and you're listening, this is episode 51. Episode 52 is a special guest. So
you've already leaked it too.
I mean, if you're in our group, I leaked it. I'm not going to say it here. So make sure you join the group on Facebook and you can find out who that is. I will say he's in the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. So if you have questions for a Hall of Famer, head over to the Facebook group, find that, ask the questions. We'll pick a couple of those to ask him next week. But so we decided to talk winter fishing. Trey went out today and got whooped. Happens a lot. Winter fishing is Ben can attest to it. I mean, anybody that's gone out in the winter can attest to it. Can be the greatest day you've ever had fishing, just full of giants, or you can spend 8 hours and never get bit. It's just one of those things it's weird. Like when they eat, they eat, and when they don't, they don't. I know for me, and I know we're going to talk about baits, but you get a lot of lookers, it seems like, this time of year.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
Ben, were you going to say something, bud?
Yeah, I mean, this time of year, it's miserable probably for the fish because it's cold, and it's miserable for us as anglers out there. We're not fortunate enough to be down in Florida, and even those Florida cold fronts get kind of chilly down there, even though it's when you're used to 70 and it's 50, it gets a little cold. But it's miserable for it can be. The worst things, your hands get cold and trying to reel and cast when your hands are cold. That's what I hate the most about winter fishing. But it's one of those that when I go out, I never expect to catch a large numbers of fish, but if I catch them, I expect to get some better quality. Is typically
that's right.
Kind of the way I'm looking for it.
Steve says he's gonna fish that Jordan tournament tomorrow. Good luck, Steve. It's probably the worst conditions possible for Jordan Lake in the winter: cold, rising water, and extremely muddy.
Yeah.
And I've never really figured out how to get them to eat when those conditions present themselves, but hopefully you can. I know, was it the last one? One of
La-
these last couple you finished second in. So
Yeah.
hopefully you can get out there and whack some. What's going on, Rodney?
Yeah. Last week they dropped 34 pounds.
Yeah, 34 pounds.
34 pounds for the win on Jordan.
The one thing I think setting up tomorrow is you got that front coming in Sunday.
That's right.
So there's a chance that could get them working a little bit, get them a little bit hungry, and hopefully for whoever heads out there to Jordan Lake in North Carolina tomorrow and jumps in that tournament, hopefully they're chewing halfway decent. So, y'all talking winter fishing? I'm fishing my first ever tournament. It's a BFL as a co on Norman last weekend in February. Yeah, Jonathan, what's going on, Chelsea? I don't have a lot to say about spotted bass in the winter. They're kind of like smallmouth. Everybody I know that fishes Norman and stuff a lot, they're like when the water hits 50, those fish push up shallow and get to chewing. So I don't know what that's going to be. I'm not going to claim to be a spot. I don't fish for them very often, but it could be a heck of a time come February. Especially we get a little bit of warm weather. Steve's going to fish that one too. Cool, but winter. So. Winter, I probably do more graphing and more just riding around in the winter than I actually do fishing. So I'll hit a few areas. Usually, I'll throw on some riprap and stuff, but I don't usually go out with the intent to do a bunch of fishing this time of year. So we're going to talk about our favorite baits in the winter, and I've had some great days on the water in the winter. But I want to talk electronics real quick, and it's a great time to get to know them, I hear a lot of people this time of year complain and start thinking they're having issues because their returns aren't good and all this. You've got to go in and you've got to change your frequencies. You cannot run at these high frequencies that we run in warmer water as the water gets colder and expect to get good returns. So I run Hummingbird for my side imaging, and mega imaging is a big thing. You're over 1.2 megahertz. So you get really clear, but as soon as that water gets below 60 degrees, it goes to crap. So from 60 to 50, I'll drop down to 800. As soon as it gets below 50, I drop to 400 and still get great returns. So you got to think about that as water cools down, sonar pings slow. So that high speed pinging starts to walk on itself. You just don't get as good return. So, and can you change them with Lowrance? I know with Garmin and with Humminbird you can.
Yeah,
I'm not as familiar. So with Lowrance, you can change that. You got to jump in there and change those frequencies, and that'll help you get better pictures in the wintertime. Is that running the big motor or trolling motor? You mean when I'm graphing? Usually I'm on the big motor, idling around. I mean, I'll get on the trolling motor and might look at brush piles and some stuff with forward facing, but typically I just put her in
drive and
go. Yeah, just let her idle along and graph. I'll run. Shoot, I went out. We had a day last December. It was like almost hit 70 degrees, and I went out to Jordan, and I think I graphed from Pose, which is on the lower end of the river, all the way past 64 Bridge and never got on plane. I just idled the whole way. It took like 6 hours. But I was just idling. I was looking for brush piles. I was looking at those channel swings and all that kind of stuff. And
it's also warmer when you're not going down the lake.
Yeah. When you're not running 55, 60 miles an hour when it's 40 degrees, it's a little bit nicer. So
I think we should talk about before we get into baits, kind of like I think there's like two periods of winter fishing. There's almost from now until probably like late February around here. Right. And that's when, you're really going out deep looking for those, offshore brush piles, those channel swings, those, rock piles, etc. But as we start getting the late winter, that's also a time that I may, if we get a warm rain or we've got 3 or 4 sunny, like 65, 70 degrees in the row, like I may just start on the bank with like a flat sided crankbait.
That's right.
Those like 45-degree angle or steeper banks. And so it's kind of seasonal in that regard, but that's just because they want to start making that transition eventually. We won't be there for a couple of months, but you can in late February, even during the spawn, you can still go catch them out, certain ones in brush piles and all, but they start getting a little more active.
Yeah.
A couple of months from now.
Yeah, I think it's So
What's up, Jeff?
winter fishing or winter is relative. Obviously we're in North Carolina, you know, for you, you guys that are in the deep north, I guess that's the deep north and deep south. It's very different, right? The northern waters are completely different. The southern waters are completely different. The central waters are different. But
you're ice fishing in the north.
Yeah, you're ice fishing in the north. So you have the best fishing. But the one thing that stays the same are bass are cold blooded, right? So their body temperatures regulate with water temperature, and so understanding like the anatomy of a bass, the colder they are, the more lethargic they are, right? The slower their metabolism is when the water is colder. And that in itself is going to, depending on the body of water you're on, and this is really why you got to just have time on the water. Each lake is, in each portion of a lake, if it has any size to it, is different. Bass will sometimes, just like the spawn, they say the northern part of your lake usually spawns first before the southern part. And that's true in the wintertime too. Like those bass behave differently. So if you spend 1 week in the winter, December, January timeframe here in North Carolina, each one of those days in that week is going to be very different. And you're going to identify a bite window, and that's not going to be like you would see in the summertime. Like you may see a bass feed once over a 2-day period versus 4, 5, 6 times during the summertime, right? So just understanding the bass is very important, and then understanding where you're located. And largemouth primarily, because like Pete said, spotted bass and smallmouth bass, they are just different.
Yeah, you're not really catching smallmouth in the winter. I mean, because you can't fish for them. Yeah. They get out in the middle of Lake Erie in 90 foot of water, and nobody's going out there.
To fish
smallmouth. So
on the Great Lakes.
Yeah. So most of the big smallmouth lakes are frozen, and they don't really catch them through the ice.
But if you're on the Tennessee River system for them, White River, that's when a lot of times you're using drop shots in 60, 70, 80 foot of water. Yeah. Even some of the lakes around here that have spots.
Yeah, Jeff, I think that said caught some big bass on Jordan in the winter. Man, they get 1 or 2 bites, but they're usually good ones. Yep, they are. Steve, we're going to talk about, all three of us are going to talk about our approaches on this fishing baits that we like to throw. So we're going to get to your question. Yep. But we like we wanted to talk about. I'm with Ben. For me, I feel like here in North Carolina, it's more like mid-March. We get that winter bite they start to transition more to that pre-spawn. Kind of start to push a little bit more, but weather obviously plays a huge role. Like Trey said, they don't really have a bite window. It's not like in the summer where you can be like, well, they're eating it at first light, and then they're eating at noon, and then they're eating at 3. At some point in time, they may eat during the day, and they might not.
Yep.
Sometimes it's just about putting a bait in front of them that they look at, and they just can't take it any longer, and then they have to eat it. So, there's a bunch of different approaches. Who wants to start with your first? So I'll start. I will. So I'll roll up to a brush pile, Steve. There's usually only 3 baits I throw in the winter. But the very first one I'm going to throw every single time is going to be an A-rig. And I don't care if the brush pile is in 4 foot of water or 70 foot of water. I'm going to throw an A-rig and I'm going to drag it, and I'm going to hit the top of that brush pile. And 9 times out of 10, if the fish are going to eat, they're going to smoke it, or if they follow it, they're probably not going to eat. You get a lot of those followers in the winter, but that's my go-to because it catches bigger fish, and usually it'll get bit on that first throw if they're going to eat it. That school of bait comes through, and they can't resist it. I mean, they're a big wad of shad comes through, and they see that. It's also 90% of the time the back bait that gets ate. And that's the one that I throw a different bait than the other one. So I usually throw something small on my 4 main arms, and then I'll put a 5-inch, 4.5, 5-inch swim bait on my other one. It almost looks like a smaller bait chasing a bigger bait, and those bigger fish can't take it. Yeah. So that's going to be my go-to to start in the winter. I'm going to spend a lot of time with an A-rig in my hand, fishing brush, fishing rocks. Basically, I'll throw it at anything. It doesn't scare me to fish it like a crankbait. So you're throwing it on big, heavy line. I know people have lost them. I've never lost one. I'll get right up on top of them with 25 pound and usually can drag anything I'm snagged in or straighten the hook before it breaks. So that's my go-to. Trey.
Well, let me just piggyback off the A-rig thing real quick. One of the things that I noticed today, And I totally screwed myself because I didn't take any of my baits out there with me. Like I emptied my boat out and forgot that I didn't have anything in
Did
there.
you seriously?
Yeah. So I didn't have anything in there.
So all you had what was on?
All I had was what I had. So I went out there with an A-rig and I love fishing the A-rig all year long. It doesn't have to be in the winter, but in the winter it's good. But if you are into the forward-facing sonar game, and you notice that the fish are following, and then they're going back to whatever structure they're on, you should change your baits up a little bit. And so it's important to understand, again, like I said, the bass itself, but then the bait in the lake. So are you throwing too big of a swim bait on your A-rig? Are you throwing not big enough? Are you throwing the wrong color? But usually it's going to be a shad pattern. But it depends on what they're eating on, because some of these lakes have gizzard shad in them. Some of they're feeding on this year's hatch of shad, so they're really tiny. So all those little things like need to play into your calculus when you're watching these fish or doing whatever. But the A-rig is deadly for me. Besides an A-rig, another bait that I like, and you just catch all species on it, is a blade bait. All the different sizes of blade baits, even the different colors. The thing about the blade bait is, one, they're pretty inexpensive. And two, they just plain out catch all fish. Today I caught white perch. That was the only thing I caught. I had plenty of fish follow it, but what I like to do, I like to work that blade bait a couple different ways. And that's an all around year bait too. Fish feed on shad. That's what they do, or bass do, at least in shad lakes. So, for winter, that thing is being like worked super slow.
Mm-hmm.
So it's either cast it out if you see fish, 30, 40, 50, 60 feet away, but you're kind of casting that out. And I'm using like 6-pound fluorocarbon to a 20-pound braid leader, or reverse that. And I'll cast it out. And if I'm not seeing any reaction, any fish swimming with it, then I'll get over the top of the fish. And then we'll start almost Demiki rigging that blade bait. But I think you got to really pay attention to how they're reacting to the blade bait, because you'll see them suspended or over cover. If they're not coming up and eating it, then it's not the right bait, right? They're not doing anything. But a lot of times when you get bit is when you don't move it. So you put it right over the top of them and you just hold it there. You'll see a lot of guys like snap it up, right? And that's really good with a jig and spoon. And you can do it with a blade bait too. But a lot of times where I get bit on that thing, and that's how I got bit today, was I didn't even move it. Just the natural movement of the blade bait itself in the water is enough to make those lethargic fish, sometimes if they're going to eat, come out. And then another great way to check to see if you're throwing the right size bait, get under a bait ball and try to snag some of those shad. And it's really hard to do, but if you can snag one of those shad, you can identify, am I throwing the right size? So blade baits are really deadly all year long. My buddy Will Hartman put me onto those years ago on Sharon Harris. That's like the only thing he throws, and he works it just like a lipless crankbait, or he drags it just like a jig. I don't know how he hasn't lost 5 million of them. But it's a good technique in the winter.
Yeah. Yep. That's one of the baits I usually keep tat on. Ben.
Yeah. When it comes to wintertime fishing, there's a lot of techniques that work extremely well. And so we're obviously just picking out a couple that are our favorites. I think, I think we can agree a lot of times the fish, in the wintertime, that they kind of set up more or less in two ways. And I say that, we all know fish will do crazy things on some days, and you're just like, why are they doing what they're doing? But a lot of times in the wintertime, those fish will either set up suspended somewhere in the water column, and that's where your blade baits, your spoons, your jerk baits, even Alabama rigs work really well. Or if they're around cover, brush piles, rock piles, a lot of times they'll be right on the bottom. And even with forward-facing sonar, you won't be able to really pick them out a lot of times because their bellies are on the bottom. They just don't want to move a whole lot. And so you got to get that bait real close. So I like dragging on the bottom. Obviously, I'm a jig fisherman, so one of my favorite ways to catch them in the wintertime is with a jig, typically a football jig. I have one laying here, so if you happen to be watching the video, I'll show it. But this is one of standard or snagless versions. But I actually cut it, spider cut it, finesse cut it there. So I'm using the same style, weight jig, 3/8 ounce, half ounce, depending on depth. But I'll just, by cutting the skirt that way, it thins it out, and then I'll use a plastic that doesn't have a lot of movement, more compact plastics. It actually thicker plastic, so there's less movement, so it's more realistic in that cold water. And I'll just drag it along and let it sit there sometimes 30, 40 seconds without moving it if I think I'm in the strike zone. And a lot of times you feel that bite, and it's a big one there. So it's a great way to pick up especially your bigger fish a lot of times in the wintertime when they're on the bottom. But you'll still pick up obviously your normal fish here and there. I've had some great days on a jig out there in January and February, and it's hard to beat. And the great thing about it, as the fish start to transition more and more shallow, you change your colors and you go to a more crawdad version as they're moving up, feeding up. And so, I mean, it allows you to be very versatile. You can work it from the bank, obviously, already out to 20, 25, 30 foot, even heavier, depending on what size jig you get. So, an excellent technique there. It's an excellent way to catch a lot of big bites if you're just with it in the summer and in the wintertime.
Well, I also think, and we've talked about it before, but
just real quick, what's going on, Zach? Dallas, Merry Christmas to you as well. Andrew, happy Friday, man. Thanks for jumping in. I do want to say Kieran put something on Instagram. Kieran, if you guys haven't heard, he's a local kid, fishes the high school BSS, has won a bunch of them tournaments. He's a heck of an angler, but he said he's been catching a bunch of 5+ pounders on Harris on a little crappy jig, 2-inch swim bait in the brush. So don't be afraid to crappy fish a brush pile, and you never know what you're going to end up with.
Well, that's true.
And that brings me up. I know we each had two to pick about, and I don't know which order we're going to go in. But Kieran brings up a good point with that little bait in the brush there. And I see Steve, he commented in the brush piles, are we drop shotting or sinking a jig? Typically I do sink that jig first in there. But I don't do a lot of drop shotting. When I want that really small profile and a brush pile and offshore, I'm using a little Ned. And when it's calm out, and you can be patient, you can use an 1/8 ounce Ned in 20, 25 foot of water. You just have to watch it fall down on live scope. But I had one of my best days ever out there, just throwing a little bitty Ned, and it was the baby goat, I think. The little baby goat junior, whatever Z-Man has, that little goat.
Yeah.
And the little craw, and you just bring it through all types of laydowns and brush piles and that. If they don't want a bigger profile bait, it's hard with that Ned, especially a weedless version, that it comes right through. And that's usually my second. If I don't get bit on the jig and a brush pile, I'll probably throw a Ned in there in the wintertime first.
Yeah, I think it's a misconception that, everyone, I mean, it's, you need to downsize your baits in the wintertime, but that doesn't mean that they won't bite a jig. And you talked about the snagless jig. I remember last year pulling up on brush on Sharon Harris, and a buddy of mine, we had the noses of our boat pointed at the same exact brush pile, and he was using a 1/2 ounce green pumpkin jig, like 49-degree water, super cold, and caught a 6-pounder and a 4-pounder back-to-back casts. So it was right place, right time, and bass. That's why jigs and bigger baits in the summertime typically pick up your bigger fish. It's the same concept in the wintertime. They don't want to exert a lot of energy eating a bunch of tiny shad. If they see, and you're in their bite window, they see a big crawdad, bluegill, whatever pattern come across their face really slow, it's an easy meal for them, and they're going to eat it. Hopefully they eat it, right? So there's a lot of, every angler has their superstitions and stuff.
My biggest winter fish have been off an A-rig in an 11-inch glide bait.
Yeah, big baits.
Yeah,
right.
Like a big glide is just a natural movement. You can fish it super slow. And like you said, when it comes over the top of that brush pile and it glides to one way and it's just kind of out there floating, it's moving slow enough where they say, "Yep, I can swim up there and eat that." And a lot of times they do. So if you're trying to get into big baits, this is a great time of year to throw a big glide bait. You're going to fish it slow. Not going to chop it. You're not going to burn it. You're just going to let it do its thing. But it's a really good time of year to get out there and throw those.
Yep.
You said, Nick, my biggest
PB
winter fish. That doesn't count, Nick. April's not a winter fish, bro.
No, that's definitely not. But my PB game came a few years ago in Sharon Harris in February.
Yep.
I was throwing a jig on standing timber in like 25 foot and hit it on the fall, So
you find yourself, Zach, you find yourself dead sticking a lot in these colder temps.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Zach, with the big glides and stuff. Yeah, I dead stick a lot this time of year. I'll glide it and then just let it sit. Especially if you get like a slow sink or something.
And even an A-rig, like you're not burning the A-rig through the water. Like
no,
you're trying to match how the
slow
bait fisher,
as slow as possible.
And if you can get an A-rig down on the bottom and to where you're not getting hung up and you can just time it perfectly, like you'll feel like you get a snag. Well, today I got a snag. But a lot of times you feel like you're snagged and it's a giant that's down there that grabbed either that bottom one or that last one on that A-rig. So,
and some of them this time of year will just freight train an A-rig and try to rip the rod out of your hands. It's really weird the way they'll eat that bait. But yeah, Zach, dead sticking those big baits, man. I can't tell how many times I've done that and had it sitting there, and then you go to move it again, and there's just weight there, and it's a fish.
I mean, that's not dead stick any bait. If you can throw dead stick it, whether that's a Ned, a Senko, if you want to use that, Nico rig, whatever you're using, drop shot, you just let it sit there. Sometimes you got to let it sit there for a minute or two. I mean, to be honest, one of the best days I had. In the wintertime, Sam came up on this was New Year's Day, I think 2020. And unfortunately, he only caught a chain pickerel. He's fishing right next to me in the back of the boat. But I had 4 fish for like 18 pounds. And she tied on a jig. It was still on the jig, the same brush pile I was. But what we noticed is that because it was so cold, I was casting out. And then I wasn't thumbing good. So every time I'd have to pick a little bit of backlash out, and I'm moving slow, it's cold, but then when I reel down, like there's a fish there. There's a lot of times that would happen, and he's like, you just got a dead seat. I think Sam was like, they're all hitting when you're not moving it, so just keep. I was like, you're right. Sometimes
that's why that's why I like a jig a lot of times in those situations, and that's when I go to like the old jig and pig style trailer, like just a fork tail with a
pork.
Yeah, like a pork.
Yeah,
I don't use the pork chunks, but that style where it's 2 little things and you got a fat hunk of plastic, and you just put it on the hook and you can let it sit there, and any current or anything in that will cause those little just to move ever so subtly. And a lot of times you let that jig soak in a brush pile I can think of times I've let them sitting there for 2 minutes before I moved it, and you pick up and it's just mushy and there's a fish there. I mean, and again, this is dependent on water temperature, like where you are.
Yeah.
If you get a day where the water, you get a couple of days of 60 degrees and the water gets up to the mid 50s.
Yep.
Those fish will get active and they'll start chasing a little bit better. Trey, that was Nick that asked what rod and line size you're using on a blade bait.
So I don't dedicate any rod to a blade bait. It's not one that I have tied on all the time, but what I have it typically tied on so I can vertically use it is a cash-in. I think it's a 7.2, whatever one I use for the wacky worm. I think it's a 7.2 medium heavy spinning rod. Yep. And I'm using Cortland 20-pound yellow braid. It's literally the same setup that I use for wacky rigging in the spawn. Or when I'm dock fishing, but I'll drop line size down to about 6 or 8 pound test versus like 10 or 12. So yeah, and that just allows me to like vertically fish it. I mean, I'll throw it on a bait caster too, but typically I'll throw it on a spinning rod just because it's a little bit easier in the wintertime. And then whatever works for you. I mean, a lot of guys will throw it on straight fluoro. A lot of guys, I wouldn't recommend throwing it on straight braid, but that's just my opinion. So yeah, that's what I use, man.
Yeah, I throw them on a bait caster, but I throw them on 7.3 medium heavy fast cash and worm jig rod, 12-pound fluoro straight.
Yeah, tip is everything with those, or the rod means a lot. So like if you find yourself hooking up and losing a lot of fish, because you do on a blade bait, those hooks are so small and stuff like that. But if you find yourself like overpowering the fish, and in the wintertime, their mouths are like rock solid, so hook penetration is really difficult depending on what bait you're using. So if you find yourself losing a lot of fish, you may need to switch your rod up to something either a little bit more sensitive or a little bit more stiff. It just depends on the situation.
Yep. They their mouths definitely get harder winter, spring, and then with water temperatures warm up. That's why you see a lot of fish in the summer get their mouths tore up real bad, because guys are jacking them and they're just not as tough.
The fish. I mean, I think everybody on here, or hopefully everybody on here is experienced anglers, but
I hope you're all new anglers.
Yeah. If you're not, like, the fish, when you catch a fish, especially a bass, it'll tell you a story. From the color of their bellies to the color of their upper lips, look down their gullet to see what they're eating. If they're high stressed out, they'll start turning red on their fins and stuff.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of things. Obviously, in the spawn, their tails will be bleeding and stuff like that when they're making beds.
If their crushers are beat red, they're eating crawfish.
They're eating craw.
Like,
yep.
There's a lot of things a bass will tell you looking at it.
Yep. So not only do electronics tell you this story, but and then the other thing that I want to mention in the wintertime too is, I know a lot of our faces are staring at our screen, but don't forget everything else that's around you. And the big thing are the birds in the wintertime. I can tell you Baden Lake is notorious for this, and so is Lake Norman. So when you go up to Lake Norman and fish those tournaments, obviously they got tons of stripers in Lake Norman, but bass also are with stripers. So I've caught them before. And so if you're watching the birds dive in the water and they're pile driving like bait, you might want to go over there and check that out. It may be striper. It may be a school of catfish. I don't know. But pay attention to your surroundings. That'll tell you a little bit too. And then, today the water was warmer. I didn't catch crap, but still, like, I was still looking at the herring on the water. They were pushed up on the dark rock. What's that?
Brad said he's a super rookie angler.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, just pay attention to your surrounding, man. That'll tell you a story as well.
We have another question. Terry Jones, hopefully you're still on here. Best baits December and January. We kind of talked about our favorites. So we've got a rig, we've got blade baits, we've got a jig. We have Ned rig.
So jerk bait's a good one too.
Jerk baits can be good, but like I said at the beginning, I have basically 3 baits tied on, and it's an A rig, a blade bait, and a jig. Those are kind of my 3 go-to winter baits. I can cover about everything with that. Sometimes I'll swap the blade bait for a lipless.
Yep.
Just because that little bit of noise you get with a lipless and everything can trigger a bite or two. But
and if there's grass on a lake, I'm going lipless.
Yeah. Well, there's no grass in any lakes. I usually fish in the winter. But yeah, if you have grass, lipless is definitely the way to go. Traps in Florida work well. Yep.
We haven't really talked winter crankbaits yet. So that
okay,
is
go. Yeah, I threw it quite a bit today.
Okay,
go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, because I usually have 2 or 3 types of crankbaits tied on. Now, for me in the wintertime, I put away my Rapalas, DT series. I put away a lot of my Strike King series. I put away some of the 6th Sense ones. Usually what I'm throwing either a wigglewort or a rock crawler. They only dive up to about 12 feet. Or I'm throwing a flat-sided crankbait like a Fritz side, especially as it gets warmer, more towards the free spawn. And then another very good one, I think it's the DD18. I think it's the River to Sea. It's the one that Tactical Bass put together a few years ago. And it'll get you down about 18 foot. So, in the wintertime, sometimes we can't get our crankbaits down. The ones that are kind of designed for winter fishing. And like, don't get me wrong, I've caught them before on the others, normal summertime crankbaits in the wintertime. But that DD one, I mean, it's designed to be burned fast. And you almost, even though it's super, super cold out, below 53 degrees, like you're just burning that thing as fast as you can, just hitting it off stuff down there. So you'll lose a couple, but that's a pretty effective one too to get their reaction strike. Because some days they just want, and I have seen it firsthand, some days they actually want to chase stuff in the wintertime. And,
Oh, yeah.
and it might be weird as we talk about it. They obviously don't, they're cold-blooded, they're lethargic, they don't eat as much. But maybe some days they realize they haven't eaten in 3 days and they want
Yeah.
something. And for whatever reason, I've seen them chase stuff all day. Whereas the day before you had to put it in front of their mouth for a minute before they'd eat. So, but I just wanted to touch on the crankbaits because that's something I do always have tied on in the wintertime. Just, depending on conditions and lake, but I always probably have 2 or 3 tied on.
Yeah.
Zach, I'll text you the ones that I use because I can't remember who makes them, but I think I went through for everybody that's listening to this episode 51. One of our listeners, Zach, who's Cash and Rod's employee and a good friend of the show, asked what our favorite split ring pliers on. Highly displeased with the ones I've got. I probably went through 30 different pairs of split ring pliers last year because I was the same way. I couldn't find one I like, and I finally found one I like, and I'll send it to you. And they're like $7 on Amazon or something. They're cheap, but they do a really good job. They're made in Texas. I'll text the link to you, or I'll post it in the chat or something so everybody can see it. But
honestly, I use the KVD ones. I'll hit them a little bit with WD-40 at the beginning of the year. And they seem to work for me. If those are the ones you have and you're displeased with them, like hopefully the ones that Pete posts are a little bit better. But I've had those ones for like 6 years, and they haven't failed me yet. But they work for me.
These,
go back.
I'll put these are the ones I'll attest to them because you all know how many thousands of split rings I put on bladed jigs.
Yep.
These came out of Walmart little jewelry box. A little Walmart special, and they've done so thousands of them. So if you need a pair right away, if you go like the jewelry section of Walmart, they usually have in there, for craft and all. And I put thousands together, so they work. I don't know how well they'll hold up. If
I was gonna take anyone's word for split rings, it'd be yours, Ben, because you have a lot more experience of putting them on than I do. Going back to the crankbait thing, there's a couple crankbaits that I'll have tied on. I don't deep crank in the wintertime, and I'm probably doing myself a disservice. I can tell for those of you who like to crankbait fish and you're like, man, I can't get my crankbait down to 18, 20 foot. There's a couple different things you can do. One, you need to figure out what type of line you're using. If you're using like 15-pound test, you probably need to drop down to like 10. You need to make sure that you're throwing it on the right rod. I throw mine on a deep cranking rod. If I'm deep cranking, a Cashin 7.6 deep cranking rod. And I'll use, 10, sometimes 12, sometimes 8 pound fluorocarbon. Just depends on what I'm doing. And then you can also add lead stickers to the bottom of your crankbait or on the bill, however you want to do it. And you can get your crankbait, and you can play with your hooks too, upsize your hooks or change different brands of hooks, and you can get your crankbait deeper there too. So
lead wire on the hooks. If you don't have the stickers, works really well too.
So
with used any of the suspending crankbaits. So I think they've got some Rapala like shad wraps that suspend.
So I'll throw shad wraps a lot. I don't crank much in the winter because like I feel like I can do everything with an A rig that I can do with a crankbait for the most part, if you're not scared. But when I do, I like to throw a shad wrap. I usually throw it on a spinning rod because they're super light and they're tough to throw, but they do suspend, which is kind of nice. So you can get them down to like a brush pile or something like that. You can tick it and then you can just stop it. And a lot of times it'll sit there, and just it being there will make them eat it because they're annoyed that it's sitting on top of their brush pile.
There's actually so the two that I'll have tied on. So I don't have any of the original wiggle warts. I have like the aftermarket Storm ones that aren't true wiggle warts, but they do work. Oh, yeah. You just need to change the hooks on them because the hooks are absolutely garbage out of the package. So those are a good one, and it's really, really hard. And I will throw the DTs, especially in February. So like December and January, not so much, but like, you know, a balsa wood crankbait has a different movement in the water than a traditional, like, well, I guess that is a traditional crankbait technically.
Yeah, Chelsea. I was just going to mention that, but go ahead.
Yeah. So the DT series, I'll still throw those. And then Fritz sides are really, really hard to beat. And you already mentioned that, Ben, but especially in the pre-spawn in February, when the fish they move up, depending on the weather, like Pete said, it's really, really hard to beat that crankbait. So I was throwing one today. I think it was a Fritz side 9.
Oh,
a Fritz side 9. And I was throwing that on riprap and throwing it off of the riprap where there was, you know, the vertical walls, like bass like to get on the vertical stuff because it's a little bit easier to move up and down to feed in the wintertime rather than on big flats. But don't let that myth, or don't let that like confuse you. Like bass are still all over the lake. It's just primarily on that vertical stuff. That Fritz side it's a hard one to beat, man. Like I don't know what it is. David Fritz got it right. That one works.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to fish shallow too in the winter. My biggest bass I ever caught in Pennsylvania, largemouth, was 6'7". I caught it in like 9 inches of water a day after ice off on one of our lakes, and it was pushed up in there. I don't know what it was eating, but it was. I saw it and I sight fished it.
Warm water. It wants some sun.
I literally put like I wasn't real big into fishing, but like a Texas rig worm, and I just flipped it up there and let it sit there, and it couldn't take it after about a minute and ate it. So don't be afraid. But Chelsea brought up the Cash and BFS, and that's what I've been for about the last year throwing those shatter abs on, or since that rod came out. I don't throw much, but yeah, the 7-foot BFS rod from Cashin's a really good rod for throwing those light crankbaits. Like
BFS stands for bait finesse system.
Yep. And
I throw the shatter abs on that. I'll throw like your junior jerk baits, like the 110 juniors and stuff on them pretty well. But yeah, I mean, you guys know I pretty much don't use spinning gear anymore, so
no,
I use the BFS stuff.
Spinning gear is good. Going back to the jig thing, and this is something I learned we all learned at like Lanier, at Norman, and stuff like that. Like if a jig's not working, you know, a good football head, shaky head, or a snagless football head jig where you just pull the skirt off from it. So if it's too aggressive, you can put like a stiff, soft plastic on the back of that. And then when targeting brush piles, and man, I never thought this would be the case, and I don't know if largemouth are acting this way, but I'm sure they do. Throw a shaky head down there with a creature bait on it or something like that. Hit the left, hit the right, and then hit the center of the brush pile and see if they're reacting a certain way. And I'm sure I am absolutely going to try that technique this year, and hopefully it works in the winter. But it's something that you can do if you're not into jigs or you don't have any jigs. Go to onecastfishing.com, use the code the OneCast, get you some. But if you don't have any right now, throw a shaky head out there.
Yeah.
And put a little
cross. Yep.
Let it soak.
Let it soak.
That's right.
That's the key this time of year, is just to slow down.
That's why you see
fish big baits, you can fish little baits, whatever you want to do, but you want to slow everything you do down this time of year. That's really there was actually a really good video I came across on, I don't know if it was on Reels or on TikTok, something I was scrolling through last night before I went to bed, and it was a dude ice fishing, and he had like an aqua view down there, and watching the way, and he caught a bunch of largemouth. He was somewhere up north. But watching the way those fish reacted, he had a little blade bait on and he was just dead sticking it. But if you watched the way they would come up and eat, it was literally they would just come up and they would just grab the back hook, and that was all. They could see something hanging there. I don't know if they thought it was the tail or what. They would grab the back hook, and he could see that on his aqua view and set the hook. So you don't need to move them. And if anything, Ike and Ellie coined it. Hook sets are free. If it does not feel right, set the hook. A lot of times it might just be mush. You'll lift up and it's like, man, that just doesn't feel normal.
Yeah.
And set the hook. Though I have noticed, and I don't know, Trey and Ben, you can comment on this if you think. I feel like in the winter, when they do bite a bait, they hold on to it a little bit longer than they do like in the summer or the spring. And I don't know if that's because their mouths are harder and they can't tell as quick that it's not an actual bait or what it is. But it does seem like you can let it soak a jig, Ned rig. You can throw that blade bait and just let it sit there. And I feel like when they do grab it, they'll hold on to it a little bit longer.
But a lot of times you won't know. And this is why your rod is so important. Whatever brand of rod you like to use, and I gotta use, Fritz's. You just got to know how to feel the fish. And the rod brand I was using before, I guarantee you, I had fish on the other end of the line that I didn't even know about. So a lot of times you won't even feel these fish if you're not using the right gear.
Yep.
So then set the hook.
I'm gonna answer a gear question right now because it's something that gets asked all the time. If you were gonna spend money, rod or reel, 1,000% the rod. The rod makes a complete difference in everything you'll do. If you're, and I'm gonna, the best way I can tell you is if you're fishing a Texas rig and you flip it out there and you let it fall on a slack line and you can't feel the fish pick your bait up as it falls on a slack line, you're using the wrong rod.
Yep. Well, Pete can attest to this. Ben, you can too. You guys know my setup. I have all casting rods. I have other brands, but I have all casting rods in the boat. I have literally the cheapest reels ever.
Yeah.
Like I don't use but $40 to $60 reels. I have a couple that are a couple $100, but my A rig I throw on an Abu Garcia Silver Max.
Yep.
Like with 20-pound fluorocarbon with a Cashin ledge rod, and it does not matter the reel as much as it matters the rod. And I 100% agree with you.
You can get cheap reels, your Cast Kings, and they may not hold up for a whole bunch of years. But if you're looking at one way to spend your money, and whether it's going to be a rod or a reel, 100% spend your money on a rod. It'll make a huge difference in the amount of fish that you catch. Also, spend the leftover money on line.
Yes.
Good line makes a huge difference. And then the reel, I mean, I'll go out there with any reel. I've been blessed with some opportunities to get some really nice reels at discounts and stuff, so I do use some nicer reels. But I'd be right there with Trey. I don't know how many Black Maxes and Silver Maxes.
I still use them.
They were great reels. I still have some like backups that I keep in the boat just in case something happens, and they work great. But you cannot. I was like most people when they start a rod. Everything was medium, heavy, fast, or whatever. Like that's all you need. And then I started to learn. And then when I finally got my first high quality like rod, I was like, I don't know. I could never not use a good rod now. It makes such a difference in the way you're able to fish. So speaking of gear, Brad, I don't know if you're still here or not. Maybe you can let the folks know, but if you haven't got your Carolina Waters gear yet, Christmas, it's a week away now, folks. A week and 2 days. So 3 days. Is it on Monday this year? Yeah, Monday. Yeah. So yeah, you're going to want to get that stuff ordered. And I do believe if you order this weekend, they'll probably get it out to you, and there's a good chance you'll have it before Christmas. So head to CarolinaWatersNC.com. Use the code OneCast, all one word. You'll save 20% off your order. They got awesome hats. They've got performance wear. They've got just had a restock on their T-shirts, which are super comfortable. Probably one of my favorite T-shirts to wear just because they're so comfortable. And there's some other stuff coming. So hoodies will be coming here pretty soon. That took a little longer from their supplier to get those, but they'll be coming up here in the not too distant future. They look really good. So make sure you check them out, CarolinaWatersNC.com. Use the code OneCast, save 20% off your order.
My kids got a couple beanies that I'm jamming, or that Santa's jamming in the stockings from Carolina Waters. So they got all sorts of gear to keep.
Brad says that's correct. So yeah, get your gear this week, folks, so they can get out to you. Don't forget my birthday's 2 weeks after Christmas. Who said that? So whoever that is, you're on my Facebook, so it comes up as Facebook user. So I got to swap back and forth.
Sounds like they really need to get stocked up.
My birthday is next Thursday.
Is it really?
Yeah, December 21st.
Man, so do you get screwed with Christmas, or do you is it double awesome?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and that's what everybody asks. I probably, in appearance, it looked like I got shafted growing up, right? Like I've never had a birthday party. Like I never had a birthday party with friends or anything, just because it's too close to Christmas, right? Like families, everybody's got everything going on, which whatever. I mean, it doesn't really matter. But it was like I never got the quantity of stuff like that, like my sister would get or whatever. But I would always get like the big gift, right? Because birthday, Christmas, they combine them, new gun, new bow, like So I mean, I guess it worked out in my favor.
It's okay. It's not movie quality.
Yeah, I mean, it's not about quantity, it's not about quantity, but yeah. So usually they like growing up, my parents combined Christmas and birthday into one pretty big, like awesome gift. Growing up in the outdoors, it was guns, it was bows, it was all that kind of stuff to get out there and hunt. So now it's just like whatever. You get used to it after.
We got a lot of
38 years
birthdays
this year.
You got your birthday coming up. I think your wife's is coming up too.
No,
isn't it?
hers is in October.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Mine is on the 5th of January.
That's right. Yeah.
So I always get screwed too, or shafted, because that's usually the first day back to work after the Christmas holiday season.
You get to go right back.
I get to go right back to work. So yeah, we got birthdays. Ben, your birthday was earlier this year, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's in October.
Yep. So man, my wife's is in October. We got a lot of October birthdays, December birthdays, January birthdays.
I knew yours was coming up.
Yep.
I was going to ask you tonight when it was, so I got to get you a birthday.
David's is January 7th.
Yeah.
Rodney's is January 12th.
That's right. Winter birthdays are the way to go, man.
And Rodney made a comment earlier. He talked about
Zach's in October. Yeah, man, we got October and, and winter, January and December covered.
Let me go back to Rodney's comment. He talked about slow rolling a spinnerbait with Colorado blades on the bottom. I'll tell you right now, a spinnerbait on Gaston, on Lake Gaston, on those vertical walls in the cold from October until probably February, March, is absolutely a clutch bait to catch big spotted bass, largemouth and stuff. So thanks, Rodney, for throwing that out there.
Brad said somebody buy me a boat. Brad, if you head to Bass Pro and Cary, talk to their tracker marine manager, I'm sure he can get you. Oh, that's you, Bo. You can get yourself hooked up. Come on, mate. Get you that nice new nitro you've been looking at. I know you're ready.
Yeah.
But no, if anybody's looking for a boat in North Carolina and you're interested in nitro or something in that product line, go see our boy Brad at the Cary Bass Pro. He is the tracker marine sales manager, I believe is the title. But they got a great team out there. So
yeah, Brad's gonna hook all three of us up with brand new boats for Christmas and the 2024 tournament season. Appreciate that, Brad.
Ignore me if I'm derailing. Tips for Baden. Like I've never.
Baden. So Baden was so Zach asked about Baden. So Baden is a lake that I've done fairly well on in previous tournaments. I think I've like got third place like almost every time there. I don't know why, but Baden
didn't catch big enough to get second or first.
Yeah, that's right. I was the third or second.
You needed
loser.
more weight.
So Baden is a great cold water lake. It's a super deep lake. There's a lot of cool history. There was an airplane that crashed there before. But for Baden, man, it's a dock lake up in the northern part of the lake. And then the southern part has islands. And then like your typical, looks like Jordan Lake, if you've ever been on there and stuff. So, but Baden's a really good crankbait lake. There's a lot of striper in that lake as well. And that was the place I was saying, look out for the birds. So I fished. It's really good in February. I don't know how it is in December and January, but I watched, we went
it's probably really good.
6.5 hours without a bite in February. And then we saw the seagulls blasting the water. And we went over there with some traditional like Strike King crankbaits and stuff back in the day and caught a limit of fish within 30 minutes. And it was luck. It was totally luck, but we were paying attention to our surroundings. So Baden's a good place to deep crank or to crankbait. In the springtime, it's a great place for frogging and buzz baits and stuff like that. It has a lot of shoreline grass and stuff. So if you get out there, you got docks. You can't go wrong with flipping a jig in there, a wacky worm, anything that you want to fish on docks. And then, believe it or not, I watched a guy win on a bladed jig, green pumpkin in the chocolate milk water. I never would have thought it, but he had like 18 pounds and won out of the back of somebody's boat. So it's a good lake, man. Hopefully you can get out there and crush some fish.
Bladed jig. It's a good bait in that muddy water. I know you don't like throwing them, but
no.
And Ray Vaughn, Working Class Outdoors over on Instagram, said when it gets really cold, don't forget the A-rig at Baden. Yeah, man.
Yeah, A-rig anywhere.
A-rig anywhere. That's what everybody asks me. Best winter bait, A-rig. Just throw it. It catches fish. It's awesome. See you guys next Friday. Hopefully I'll have Harris Chain report for anyone that wants to hear about it.
We definitely want to hear about it.
Tight lines. Yep. All right, Andrew. Thanks for jumping on, man. We appreciate you. We should maybe we'll be live next Friday. Hopefully we will. It's right before Christmas. I'm leaving to go back to Pennsylvania for a week Saturday morning, but we should be able to do a live Fishing Friday and get with y'all before Christmas. Maybe we'll have Trey read the night before Christmas or something for But we appreciate everybody jumping on. We're coming up on an hour. If anybody has any questions, now is the time to ask, but we're going to start wrapping things up here. There was something else.
We are going to do the giveaway here coming shortly. It's going to be after the first of the year. So be on the lookout for that. We got a bunch of goodies and stuff that have been donated kindly by a lot of different brands and partners and stuff. So be on the lookout for that. We'll make social media posts and that will be coming soon. And, we might have another partner coming on board that we're excited about. So once that officially happens, we'll make an announcement.
Chelsea said the night before Fishmas.
The night before Fishmas. Everything's fishuational.
Yeah. Thanks, Rick, for the early birthday wish. New partner, hopefully coming after the new year. If you're not on our Facebook group, go join. We're letting you know who our guest that's coming on Wednesday is. If you have questions, we're going to pick a few. And that'll be our 52nd episode, which is really cool. So we have a Bass Fishing Hall of Famer is going to be our 1 year episode. So 52 weeks we've released an episode, which we did have 1 week where we released 2. When we first started, our first 2 episodes released on the same week because we didn't know how to schedule and understand how to post episodes. So it didn't go how we planned. So 52 episodes will be a year. We're calling it 52 weeks. So our plan when we started a year ago was just to release an episode every week, and we've done it. We've done it, man. Yep. It's been awesome. It's been awesome to grow. We've met so many really cool people, and not just industry people, like just anglers like us. David. I don't know if we would have met David Fuchs. You're on here all the time. Nick, we obviously knew you already. I'm not here kind of, but no, David. I mean, we got a lot of fans on here. I can't go through. You've heard us talk to them. Andrew was on here earlier. Dave Mosier, like a lot of folks we may not have ever met if it weren't for starting this stuff. Rodney's on here all the time.
It's also been it's been pretty awesome today at the lake. I talked to a guy who was launching his kayak and gave him a sticker and our card and said, hey, if you're interested in hearing about fishing, local fishing, stuff like that, national fishing, like give us a shout. But the show has been awesome. Without your guys' support, it definitely couldn't have happened. And we just continue to spread the narrative and spread the word. We're all about education and information and stuff like that. So we want you guys to continue commenting. Let us know what your thoughts are on like topics of discussion and things like that, especially for Fishing Friday Lives. Obviously, we do the podcast, but this one is going to be the actual podcast show. So without you guys' feedback, it's not as interesting.
Yeah, we really enjoy everybody that jumps on here, everybody that interacts on our lives in the group. Not that we don't enjoy all our fans. Don't get me wrong. If you haven't liked and commented, subscribe to our stuff, please do that. It helps us continue to grow. It helps us push algorithms and all of that good stuff. You're always helpful if you share stuff. We put our posts out with our episodes every week and all that stuff. So everybody's been awesome, man. I'm just super proud of what we've built. And I think maybe next Fishing Friday, if we do it, I'll share some of those numbers with you, like as far as the countries we've been downloaded in and states. And It's pretty wild. We have regular listeners in several countries. So if you're one of our 3 Aussies that download every week, we appreciate you and shoot me a DM and let's talk barramundi fishing. I'm hoping that's what you do, because that stuff interests me, man. Those barramundi are nuts. They're like a giant largemouth on crack cocaine. So, looking forward to seeing everyone at the Raleigh Fishing Show next month. Yeah, Nick, we'll be at Raleigh. All of us will be there in some capacity at different booths and doing different things. Ben will be there with OneCast Fishing, and we'll be hanging out with him. We'll be hanging out with Carolina Waters. I'll be spending some time over there with Cashin. Probably spend a little bit of time with Gamma if Dale's up here this year. So if you're in the Raleigh area, make sure you check that out. I also know Ben's taking OneCast Fishing to Knoxville and to Richmond. So if any of those are in your neighborhood, make sure you swing and check those out. I probably won't make Knoxville, and I know Trey probably won't. I think I'm probably going to make it up to Richmond for a day at least, maybe Saturday, Sunday. So hopefully I can see some of y'all there. But yeah, looking forward to 2024. What we're able to bring to everybody, and hopefully we can keep entertaining, keep this thing rolling. That is our plan. As we say every week, we couldn't do it without you. So appreciate all that. Man, what you got? Anything?
I think you guys covered it well. I don't want to keep them any longer. So appreciate everyone listening. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. That's all I got.
Sure.
All right, guys.
You want to close us out?
Merry Christmas, and we'll see you in the new year. And like we always say, let's continue to grow a culture of anglers helping anglers, one cast at a time.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh God, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.